What was it like to come home? I mean, obviously you saw things that most people hope they never see. Was it hard to acclimate back to life in the US? And there was a lot of like anti-war sentiment at the time. I mean, what was it like for you trying to acclimate back to, I guess, quote unquote, normal society after being away in war like that?
Well, first of all, when we came back, we weren't accepted or we weren't met with cheers or anything. a lot of a lot of people were spitting on GIs as they came back to the country, and
Were you angry?
yeah, you could say I was really ticked off. I'm like, we're fighting for our country, and I tell people if Vietnam was all over again, I'd do it again, just because, even though in a lot of cases it was a political war, nevertheless, I was serving my country, and a lot of civilians don't understand that concept, serving your country.
Yeah.
It's important if you're going to be an American. If you don't like America, then leave.
Yeah.
And these days drives me crazy how they let these people get away with all this stuff that's going on. And these people don't like America. Why are they here?
And what was it like just acclimating back to civilian life at that point? Was it an adjustment or?
It was a big adjustment because, first of all, I had a GED. Second of all, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Third of all, when you applied for a job and they found out you're ex-GI, back then people didn't even like you then.
Wow.
So I had a hard time finding a job. I jumped from job to job. I was like butcher, baker, candlestick maker. I did everything. I worked for an electrician as a helper. I worked for a glass company installing glass. I worked for an antenna company. Back then, TVs had antennas. That was back in the day. Putting antennas on roofs. I did a lot of stuff. Then finally Millie said, "You need to be professional. You need to find something professional." So I went to Metropolitan Life. I became an MIC,
What's an MIC?
Metropolitan Insurance Consultant.
And is this in New York City, Nick?
No, Cleveland.
Okay.
We get to New York, and I'm trying to get a job here, there, and everywhere. And I got a job as overseas account salesman for a manufacturing company. And Millie says, "You should go to college." The VA said they'll pay you to go to college. It was under vocational rehabilitation. And I found out, hey, they pay me $500 a month, plus pay my school bills and my tuition, my books, my supplies, everything. And so I went to Wagner College in Staten Island. And
Yeah.
back then, Wagner, of course, it's a private college, but I had to go through 2.5 days of testing with the VA to see what I was best suited for. And the VA counselor, after the testing, said, "You're best suited for accounting." I said, "Yeah, right." So I minored in accounting, majored in economics, and all of my electives were art of the cinema, painting, drawing, leather. I was really serious about school.
It sounds like Millie's been your guiding light for professional decisions the way through.
Amen. There are words of wisdom. This 105-year-old guy is going to celebrate his 105th birthday. His wife had died about 20 years before that. He wrote Donald Trump a letter and said, "President Trump, can you come to my 105th party?" He was World War II vet. And Trump couldn't make it, but he sent him a nice video and to play at his birthday party. And during the party, Trump asked, "What's your secret to long life?" He said, "Find a woman that you want to spend the rest of your life with and stay active."
Simple, right?
Millie's the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with.
I heard it's stay active, find the woman you want to spend the rest of your life with, and go on a lot of cruises.
Yeah, November will be 48.
Hey, Nick, do you feel like, I mean, obviously growing up with a lot of financial uncertainty and obviously facing mortality at a very young age, do you think that shaped your ability to take risk and be an entrepreneur? I mean, it sounds like you kind of like had this mentality of, I'll just jump off this cliff and see what happens and figure it out as I go down there. Do you think that the way you were, given your background, that had a lot to do with you becoming an entrepreneur and basically, really throwing caution to the wind to some extent?
That is very true because it's every step of my professional life since I started my practice. There are always risks. People think, oh, it's easy running a business, and you guys know what it's like. But there are highs and there are lows. And if you really want to be a business person and run a business, you have to be able to take risks. And for instance, this building, and you guys know what the building's like, right? Well, my partner wanted, at the time, I had this 40% partner, and he wanted to buy a house in Riverside here, which is like an old neighborhood where lawyers and doctors and people like that buy houses and set up businesses. And I was driving by here one day and I saw the sign, land for sale. And I pulled in, and the only building here was across the street, the real estate broker who was going to develop this community for businesses. And he was representing an insurance company in Georgia who owned the property. And I said, what's the best property and what's the best lot in this place? And he said, right across the street from me. So I came over here and it was all jungle, and I'm walking around it in my suit claiming this is what I'm going to do. This is what the Lord wants me to do, build a building. And I went back to Millie and my partner, and they said, you're crazy. We don't have the money for that. And I went up to the mountain. The Lord will provide. So I'm like, in fact, at closing, this was interesting. At closing, you're supposed to have 20% on a commercial property, down in order to finance it. My bank at the time was working very well with me. And so the banker, I said, look, it's tax season. I don't have all of the money for the 20%. Can I give you 10% down and 10% on April 15th? And he said, sure. And so the 10% down, in fact, when we went to closing that day, we had to bring checks from clients that hadn't even been deposited because I didn't have the 10%. And so when we closed, after we closed, April 15th, I went to him and I said, I'll give you the other 10%. He said, don't bother. It's already financed. We'll leave it like that. So, yeah. And so you have to take risks. Otherwise, you don't get ahead. If you're not going to take risks, you're going to be where you always were and do what you always did and not get ahead.
Do you think there's any correlation between going to war, coming back? Do you think that's highly correlated at all?
Oh, yeah. In war, you have to step out. You're always on edge in battle, but also on edge. One night we set up an ambush for the Ho Chi Minh Trail to catch them coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and they knew where we were, and they hit us from behind, and we scattered middle of the night, 2:00 in the morning, and I wound up in a rice paddy, and I was afraid to call out to anybody because I didn't want the enemy to know where I was. And when it broke day, and besides the leeches and everything, I did hear a noise, and I'm like, uh-oh, are they going to get me? And it was a guy next to me, and he and I hooked up, and we made our way back to camp. But the moral of that story is you never know in battle what you're going to come against, and you always have to be prepared. So you always have to have a backup plan. And I was watching a movie the other night, and the guy said, we're going to go to plan B. And the other guy said, what's plan B? He says, I don't know yet. So, but you always have to have a backup plan, but you can't count on everything going smoothly, and there's always going to be bumps in the road. But what you have to learn is pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and continue on. Because I found out that quitters are people who come against obstacles and they stop. Winners are people who come against obstacles and try to make their way through the obstacle. If they fall, they get up and they go the other way. So in business, you're going to, and you always have to try something new. It's like you guys are my basic training for podcasts because I've never done it, but I'm going to do it. And I have to do something new all the time or else business gets stale. And every business has a life cycle. In combat, you have a life cycle, but every business has a life cycle, and it's a bell curve. And if you don't come up with something on the downside of the bell curve to start a new bell curve, you're going to continue to go down. So in fact, the other day I just drafted a letter to churches, because I do a lot of churches, telling them what we do, because there are some churches out there that don't know us.